All right, so I want to spend a little time talking about Josh Allen today. I think there's a good conversation to be had. We've seen Josh Allen in the spotlight a little more this year. A lot of different people having their opinions about the way he's looking and performing. But I've also heard some people within the Bears community, the community I'm in the most, and others as well, talking about, well, how come Buffalo was able to do this, and how come our team couldn't develop our quarterback? And so that's why we should fire them and all that. And that's a whole different discussion. But I thought Josh Allen is a very good case study to talk about development, especially in terms of the quarterback. But there's a lot of different concepts I think that you see come into play with Josh Allen. And again, as a case study, these are a lot of things that I talk about during draft, a lot of concepts that I've seen and know about. But, you know, for the casual people, this would be a good, solid, tangible example of it. So just to back up and going into that draft, and it seems like such a long time ago, but I was not a big fan of Josh. I mean, I really disliked Josh. I wouldn't say I disliked him like as a person, but as a prospect, I was not a big fan. And with quarterbacks, with any position, if you are into the draft stuff, as you cover it, you get better and better. There's some positions you're just better at evaluating, but each one you get better as you learn and understand more. And for me with quarterbacks, I never gave as much, I never gave as much praise to the whole strong arm thing as some other people. And I'd say I appreciate it more, but I still am not at a point where, you know, cause some people, they drop everything else cause they see a big arm. And I don't want to ever be at that point. I don't think that makes sense, but I've learned to understand and appreciate more of how much that adds to the ceiling of a quarterback. Obviously there's going to be prospects that are more potential than actual products right now, but I think the ceiling is so much higher when you do have somebody with that big arm. And I didn't appreciate that as much back when I was evaluating Josh Allen. But either way, you knew he had a huge arm. I mean, level 5 arm for what I grade. But his accuracy was terrible. And then, you know, you just had the small school competition and all that. So there's a lot of questions there. And then the mechanics, just everything else really about his quarterback play wasn't good. But obviously people saw the size, they saw the mobility, they saw the arm, and that was really intriguing for a lot of people. But I was very down on him as a prospect. And so he ended up getting drafted and whatnot. And again, as I've evolved, I mean, I don't root against players. There's no reason to. Even if I'm wrong or right, like to me, that's not the point of it. To just make myself look right is to evolve and get better. And so once he got drafted, it was just like, okay, he's going to Buffalo. And, you know, there wasn't much thought about Buffalo at the time. And so it's just like, okay, well, whatever. And then you saw that he was going to be one of those quarterbacks that played early. And I thought that was going to be a real issue for him. And, you know, we've seen quarterbacks like this many times that have a lot of issues, a lot of upside. They throw them into the wolves and they don't respond well, or they never reach their potential. And I would probably say I was feeling like that's what it was going to be. Now, one thing that you saw was that, and this is one of the first concepts, is that the organization had to have a plan for Josh Allen in terms of they knew that they were getting a project. It wasn't, okay, let's just force feed him into the system or whatever you want to call it. Let's actually retool and relook at how we do things on the offensive side so that we can accent and complement what he does. And similar to Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, actually a good amount of teams have done this, but that comes out of necessity with the way quarterbacks are not skilled like they used to be. But still, that's something they did, and it allowed for him to have confidence. And that's one of the biggest things that I talk about, and people really don't understand, like that makes such a huge difference. And so while you have these kind of, I wouldn't even say half NFL offenses, some of these are just straight like college offenses sometimes, with what you see with some of these quarterbacks recently. Even though that's the case, I still understood the value of it. Because you're doing what makes your team effective. You're leaning into the strengths. And so you might be more of a run heavy team, or you might need to run your quarterback as part of the run game and not set up 7-step drops and try to go vertical all the time because you don't have the O-line for that, or the quarterback's not reading coverage, whatever it is. Instead of forcing them into the fire, you're allowing them to gain confidence. Now, me personally, I'd rather have them sit and learn kind of what the professional system and what all that looks like and grow into it. But when you're putting them out there, I do think it's smart that instead of just throwing them to the fire, you're giving them a gradual build. And so confidence starts everything off. Once the quarterback feels confident, or the player feels confident that they can they can play football on the NFL level, they're just like any other human, any other psychology. They have to build their self-efficacy. They have to be able to go through experiences to say, okay, yes, I do got it, or I am that good. And so once you have that confidence, that gives you the ability to gradually try more and do more, because you feel that you have what it takes to get it done. And so confidence is key. I would say the second thing is that this is an example of a team not settling, because with any offense, you want to get better and do more. But especially when you're talking about developing a young quarterback, it's one thing to say, okay, Josh, we're going to run you on these type of plays and we're going to do this and that, and then that's just all we're ever going to do. It's a whole nother thing to say, okay, well, in year 2, we're going to start adding this and we're going to start doing this and putting this on your plate. And that's one of the things the Bills did, is they didn't stay stagnant in that same offense that, he had his rookie year or the second year. They've evolved that offense and they started to add more things to it. And to the point where we see it at now, where it's a little more balanced. I mean, they still know where their weapons are, but at the same time, it's not just Josh Allen, being a third running back there. And I think about Baltimore right now, and there's a little bit of that. I think there's definitely a little bit of, we're rolling with the same thing this year. And not only did people figure it out when you give people time to figure it out, but also you can see that Lamar hasn't really taken any major step as a quarterback. And so I think what was important to distinguish between that and Buffalo is that you see they gradually gave Josh Allen more on his plate. And again, if you started off correctly with confidence and then you add to it, then he's more likely to take it in and feel like he can conquer it and he's going to do his best and all that. And so I think those are two important lessons. And then the third one is that you got to have some consistency. So you listen to Josh Allen, you listen to people a part of the team, and he's like, look, this is my third year in the system. This is my third year with this playbook, with this coach. And so now things are really clicking in a different way. And so, again, I talk at length about all this firing people in the middle of the season, or moving on from a coach after 1 year, and all these silly things we see in the NFL that mirror the NBA more and more every day, which is a sad thing. this idea that everything needs to happen now. And it's only been within the last 5 to 7 years that we saw that culture creep in, where everything has to happen now. And it's just silly. It takes time to do things. And so even though Buffalo has been much more competitive than they might have been in the past, they haven't been perfect. And Josh Allen definitely has not, he's been effective, but he's not been really like a quarterback like he is now. And so there definitely could be temptations to call for people's jobs or try to go in a different direction, or the scapegoating thing. Okay, well, we're going to get rid of the offensive coordinator and keep everybody else, or we're going to get rid of, the defense, whatever it is, the scapegoating. Instead of that, they kind of stayed the course and, for lack of a better word, trusted in the process. And so, Josh Allen talking about it for himself is like, that's one of the biggest things that he credits, is that he's had time to get better and to rep and to practice and to stay within this thing. Whereas I think a lot of teams, like I said, if they're not blowing it up, then you got some coaches that feel the pressure to just keep switching things up instead of gradually, again, giving some consistency while still adding on pieces. And so another credit to the organization. And there's definitely organizations out there that stay the course. They don't overreact. They give you plenty of time to do what you have to do, and they recognize the potential and give you the time to do it. But a lot of teams, they just want to make a move to make a move. They want to be in the headlines. They want to make a splash, and it's just going to be the next disaster. And so appreciating Buffalo giving that consistency and letting it kind of marinate and take time. And so the next thing is Josh Allen. And I would actually put this all into one thing. Josh Allen talks a lot about the work he did to change his mechanics, to figure out his throwing stroke, his motion, the things that he went through to see how his body was firing when he was throwing, like what it all looked like mechanically. And then once he was able to catalog and categorize it, then he was able to start adjusting and tweaking it. Now, you can see his accuracy has changed a lot, and his ball placement and control has changed a lot. We know he has a big arm, and a lot of times I call it big arm syndrome when I go through the draft, because a lot of time prospects got big arm syndrome where they let their mechanics break down and they try to force passes into places that they shouldn't be throwing, but they think because they got a strong arm, they can fit it in there. And also they don't know how to control their accuracy. Or you got some guys that don't know how to control their ball tempo. Like it's always at a high velocity. And so they don't really understand the nuances of passing. And Josh Allen was definitely one of those people. And he was able to work and get better at it. And he was able to go through a number of different things that helped him get better at his mechanics, while also having more time in the system to get better at understanding the coverages and what he needs to do on the field. Now, the thing is about that is that's not guaranteed, because everybody's like, well, what does that come from? That comes from the player. Everybody's going to give credit to the QB coach or the head coach, the offensive coordinator. They're going to give credit to everybody. And not to say that they don't play their part, but at the end of the day, the biggest thing is it comes from the player. The player has to be willing not only to put in the work, but to admit, like, okay, maybe my throwing motion isn't right. You get a lot of people that get defensive. A lot of quarterbacks, they get defensive about that. It's one thing to say, I want to be better. I don't have the ego to, quote unquote, do it my way. I just want to be better. And so if it looks like, or the people that are experts say my throwing motion is off and it's bad, well, I want to correct that. And then I'm going to put in the work to do that. Okay, you say my accuracy is bad, or I don't really know how to have ball control. Okay, let me work on that. Let me see that. Okay, let me go to put the work in. And he put the work in. He committed. He balled in for whatever reason. I don't know him. But he did the work. And that's the biggest thing that I talk about. I don't know him. And I say that in the draft is like all this stuff, looking at the combine numbers, looking at all the film, hearing the stories, all that is good and gravy. But the biggest piece that we don't see is the person. We don't get most of us, obviously, you might know some people in the NFL, whatever, but for the most part, we don't, every year, we don't get to sit down and talk with these people. We don't get to know them. And so it is a NFL team's job, or the front office, it's their job to figure out the psychology of a player. So this is the biggest reason, one of the biggest reasons. Part of it is the NFL, or as far as the reason of why players don't pan out the same, it's not consistent. Part of it is the nature of the game. It's a team sport. Like, who you're around is going to make a big difference. But the other part is they're made up differently. So to sit here and say, oh yeah, you threw Trubisky and you into the situation instead of Josh Allen, would have been the exact same. That's not true. You have no idea how he would have reacted in that. And then to say, oh, well, if Josh Allen came here, he would have been horrible and been ruined. That's not exactly true either. Now, I think there's a lot of good parts in conjunction that did happen in Buffalo. But from all accounts of what we've seen from Josh Allen, what he's actually done off the field and who everybody says he is, it seems as if that I wouldn't say he's going to make it work no matter what, but he had the capacity to get better. And that's one of the biggest things. It's one thing to grade traits and skill sets and say, okay, you got potential, you got a ceiling. We could do that, but what is your capacity to reach that potential? A lot of that has to do with the player. And then a good amount of that has to do with the situation as well. So this is a good case study of it all coming together. And I'm not saying Josh Allen is elite. That's a conversation right now, which is a little silly to me. I'm not saying he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks ever, all that. But what I can say is factually, when you look at what he was, where he was coming out of Wyoming and what he was to what he is now, there's a drastic change. I remember watching the Houston playoff game not too long ago, and they still do it now. They do the little reverse and then throw it back to Josh Allen. They did the jet sweeps. They did the QB read. It seemed like they was doing everything but letting him throw. And Watson wasn't faring too much better on the other side. But I remember just like, man, like they were winning. I was like, but he is not playing quarterback. And then you fast forward to this year where you're watching them and the plays are completely different as far as the plays he makes. And then I think other thing he noticed and said is that he had to learn how to be better in the pocket. And that's one thing, especially right now, that's hard because everybody's telling you, no, extend the play, break the pocket. We want mobile quarterbacks. And it's like, there's a time and place for that. Aaron Rodgers, the king of it. Then you got Pat Mahomes doing it great. Like, though they show you that there's times to do that, but that's not all you have to do. You have to know how to play in the pocket to be great. And I've seen Josh Allen. I think we all seen that he's understanding that's where the big plays are. And so he's gotten better at it. And he's got work to do. Every player continually could get better. But I think it's, again, a good snapshot to look at something and say, okay, this is how these concepts play out. Whether it's the concept of understanding people are mentally built different. And so that's going to change how they go after things and what they are able and willing to change. Also consistency, not, throwing the baby out the bathwater, as they say, when things look bad. And, it's tough because Buffalo didn't go 0-16 or nothing. So it's not like, okay, they were really forced to make a choice. But I think still in this league, it's very easy to find ways to fire people, especially when you're not winning Super Bowls. So I think just having some consistency around him shows a whole lot as far as the system and what that can do for you. And then having a plan to get that quarterback some confidence early on is important. Specifically in the Trubisky case, I would say that's one area we definitely failed at as a coaching staff. We didn't really do the things that make him feel comfortable. And here we are, 4 years later, talking about that stuff still. We got to find some things that he likes and do the things that makes him feel comfortable. He's past that point. Like, you should be, after 3 or 4 years, you should be at the point where you're starting to mature. And it's probably going to have to happen with somebody else. But again, I think Buffalo is a good, nice little illustration of how that could work out. So that's it for me. Go down comment section. Let me know what you think. Share around. Get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.